This is episode 127 of Teacher Approved.
You're listening to Teacher Approved, the podcast helping educators elevate what matters and simplify the rest. I'm Heidi.
And I'm Emily. We're the creators behind Second Story Window, where we give research-based and teacher-approved strategies that make teaching less stressful and more effective. You can check out the show notes and resources from each episode at secondstorywindow.net.
We're so glad you're tuning in today. Let's get to the show.
Hey there, thanks for joining us today. In today's episode, we've got 10 teacher-approved suggestions for keeping those kids motivated all the way to the end of the school year and sharing a tip for how to get a little ahead for back to school.
We start our episodes with a morning message just like we used to do at morning meeting in our classrooms. This week's morning message is, who is your favorite Abbott Elementary character? Emily, who is your favorite? I know it's hard to pick.
It is hard to pick. It really is because it depends on the episode. Every episode I'm in love with somebody new because they are all so well written. But I just love Barbara.
She's so good.
She says the most hilarious things and her delivery is impeccable. My favorite character quirk of hers is her tendency to mix up white and black celebrities, like saying Carrie Underwood when she means Kerry Washington. I get such a kick out of it.
So clever. So funny.
Who's your favorite, Heidi?
Well, this is a toughie. I feel like I identify with Janine the most. I mean, really cut from the same cloth on that one. And I love that she's a second grade teacher too. So it's just very familiar territory of feeling like you're the only one that can save the whole world and these precious kids at every moment of the day. But I think my favorite character, and this is kind of a new love this season, is Mr. Johnson.
Oh my
I'm
gosh.
really just coming around on him. I feel it's because listening to the Office Ladies podcast and doing a rewatch with that and appreciating Creed on a whole new level.
Yes, he's like Abbott Elementary's Creed for sure.
I miss so much. I'm trying to really pay better attention to him. He has the best, hilarious gems that he just drops and moves on. And if you're not paying attention, you miss them. They're so funny. And then the scene where he's arguing with the room.
Oh, that killed me. That was so funny. If you're not watching Abbott Elementary, you are seriously missing out.
Yeah, you're totally missing out. And you've got summer now. You can catch up on it.
Lori says that she likes to root for Gregory. He feels like an underdog, but Ava keeps me laughing at her ridiculousness.
Yes.
And Melissa is also an Ava fan. She says Ava is the best. She's so over the top. However, her character has grown as a person as the seasons go by. She's shown she has heart under her bravado.
I think the writers have done a really good job making her insufferable, but in an endearing way.
It's kind of like with Michael Scott, where at the beginning of the series, you don't root for him because he's just so obnoxious. But as the series goes on, you come to root for him. Because I didn't like Ava at first because she was the worst. But now I get a real kick out of her. We'd love to know who you root for on Abbott Elementary. So come join the conversation over in our Teacher Approved Facebook group. Well, the end of the year comes with so many unique challenges. We've talked about some of them recently. You can go back to episode 124 if you want some tips for managing spring fever and all the fun that comes with that.
But today we are talking about another end-of-year malady called officially no motivationitis or, something like that. Symptoms include negative attitude, sloppy work, decreased participation, low energy levels, aimless wandering, diminished effort, avoiding assignments, procrastinating, increased confrontational behaviors, and honestly, that list could go on.
Clearly, we need a remedy for this highly contagious syndrome stat. Typically, when a class is overrun with behavior problems, the solution is to increase either novelty or structure. But at the end of the school year, the solution isn't that straightforward.
Unfortunately, right? Usually when novelty is high, before winter break or before field trip, we can increase our classroom structure to rebalance the energy in the room. But when we reach the end of the school year, novelty is at peak levels as kids anticipate summer break. But if we increase our class structure in our typical ways, like practicing procedures, narrowing choices, and upholding consequences, we are actually fueling the no motivationitis outbreak.
The kids have had 170 days of that already. They are craving novelty, but if we just toss in some novelty, like letting kids take their shoes off for an afternoon, that sounds smelly. I don't think I would do that. But if we do that and we're not also increasing the structure, we turn the kids from bored and burned out to wild and out of control.
Which is definitely not an improvement. The solution to this is to increase novelty and structure at the same time. And don't let that sound overwhelming. We have got 10 easy ways to increase your students' motivation without it turning into a free-for-all.
Our first suggestion is to offer a challenge. If you are done with your testing, a challenge is a great way for students to solve problems with their academic learning. STEM challenges are a natural fit for this type of activity. Students could create foil boats that can hold pennies without sinking, or design marble mazes. There are so many fun ideas for STEM challenges.
In researching this episode, I actually came across a great free resource from Destination Imagination, which I think is a fun name. And it has some really fun challenge suggestions. For example, having your students have to tell a story using only actions and 7 words. I think that could be really fun. We'll put a link to this PDF in the show notes. And obviously, these sorts of challenges will be easier for older students. But looking over them, I think with some adapting and teacher support, most of them could work for first and second graders too.
Projects that involve group work can be extra motivating for students. At this time of year, students typically are hungry for more action and talking, and cooperative learning challenges can help satisfy both of those cravings.
Now, moving on to our second suggestion, this time of year, try involving students in a project. So a project may sound similar to a challenge, but they actually have different goals. A challenge typically involves creative problem solving, and it may have an open-ended solution. A project, on the other hand, requires working over a period of time toward a specific goal.
Either as individuals or in groups, you could have your students all working on the same project. For example, students could rewrite the ending of a favorite fable or fairy tale, or students could all contribute a part of a larger project like making a Shapes Around Our School PowerPoint.
Or if you've really got the time and energy, you could have students choose their own project to work on. With a program like Genius Hour, teachers set aside an hour a week for students to research and prepare a project on their chosen topic. But at the end of the year, an hour a week is not going to get you too far. Instead, it might be more beneficial to set aside like 30 minutes a day for students to work.
And if you can take that on at the end of the year, I am sending you 1 million high fives. I'm tired just thinking about it. I think I'd do better with some end-of-year art projects or readers' theaters performances. I have done that at the end of the year. That's a little bit easier than managing individual students' projects. But if you're already familiar with a program like Genius Hour, maybe it would be much more doable than starting from scratch in May.
On the other hand, the end of the school year does lend itself to trying something new. And trying something new also happens to be our third suggestion for motivating kids at the end of the year. If you've seen something online or from another teacher that you've considered implementing, maybe something like a routine like Genius Hour or book clubs or digital math games, you can give it a test run now so you'll know if you want to commit to it next year. Not only will trying something new motivate your students, it can help you find the motivation to keep going too. As our Grammy used to say, a change is as good as a rest. Although she would say it with a Scottish accent, and I can't do that.
Neither one of us inherited a Scottish accent, sadly. Auditioning a new program now is giving your back-to-school self a little gift too. When it comes time to launch the new year, you've already worked out some of the kinks, and your stressed out September self will be so grateful.
And talking about next year, our fourth tip for motivating students is to preview next year's content. This is one of my favorite ways to increase novelty and structure at the same time. To make this work, take a peek at the curriculum for the grade above you and choose a topic your students will be excited to learn about. This might be something like writing in cursive or learning 2-digit multiplication.
For this to work, you want to make a big deal about how your class has learned so much during the year that you think they're ready for this next step, even though it's technically something they won't get to until the next grade. Then spend a few days teaching your students this new topic.
This motivates kids because you are raising the level of concern. When kids realize this is something that they are going to be responsible to know one day, they are more motivated to engage with what's going on.
If you don't want to focus on a single topic, you could offer a larger overview of the major topics that will be taught next year. Have students share what they already know about those areas and what they're excited to learn about.
Just a couple of guidelines if you do decide to add in some of next year's content. First, we don't want this to increase anyone's anxiety. That's why it's important to start by reminding students how much they already know and assure them that they are ready to take this next step.
Yeah, and then make sure that you're not stepping on other teachers' toes by introducing the topic wrong. I'd suggest that you limit your instruction to the hands-on introductory level.
I actually had something like this happen to me when I was a student. My second grade teacher taught us multiplication at the end of the year. And I don't remember exactly what she taught us, but I remember when my third grade teacher was introducing multiplication, I was doing whatever my second grade teacher had taught, and my third grade teacher was like, what is going on? And so I was like, well, this is what Mrs. Green did. And my third grade teacher did not think this was the right thing to be doing. I can't remember what I did wrong, but I have a very clear memory of my teacher, Mrs. Harder. That's a rough name for a teacher.
I could picture her before you even said the name. I knew who your third grade teacher was.
Yeah, this memory of her being frustrated, and I could tell she wasn't frustrated with me, but that she was frustrated with kind of having to deal with this problem from all of these kids from Mrs. Green's class.
We don't want to make our coworkers' jobs harder. Let's aim for lessons at the most basic level of introduction and maybe throw in a few games to keep things interesting. Okay, now let's go on to our fifth tip, which is to celebrate growth. Recognizing progress is one of the best means of motivation. If you can see how far you've come, it makes it easier to keep on going.
I loved how easy it was to do this with our morning work because I had my students' pages bound into a book for the whole year. It made it really easy to look backwards. And on the first day of school, I kind of started this little tradition as the kids would flip through the pages and they would get toward the back of the book and they would start to get a little concerned by how hard the pages seemed. But I promised them that when we got to the end of the year, they would think it was so easy. They wouldn't even give it a second thought. And then on one of the last weeks of school, in the morning after we had corrected our morning work, I would ask the kids how they could do such a good job with all of those hard questions. And you know how kids are. They'd kind of scoff and be like, that wasn't hard. That was so easy for me. And then I would remind them of the conversation we had on the first day, which of course they don't remember, but that's okay. I would point out that at the beginning of the year, those pages seemed impossible. And now look how easy it was. They didn't even give it a second thought.
I love that your allergies are making it seem like you're really choked up about morning work. I mean, we are very passionate about morning work and the transformation that your students will see. Another idea for celebrating growth is making a class book. You can have each student contribute a page highlighting their greatest accomplishment from the year, or you could do something similar in a slideshow if a book isn't your thing.
Having students make time capsules is a meaningful way to bridge the ending of one year and the start of the next. Students can reflect on the highs and the lows of this year and make goals and predictions for what they hope the next year will bring.
As important as reflection is, it can feel bittersweet. So let's not forget to keep things light. Our sixth tip for keeping students motivated is to add in the fun.
There are so many fun end-of-year celebrations. Coming up with ideas is definitely not the problem. The problem is having to narrow down all of the options.
You know we love a theme day. That's always a great way to increase both structure and novelty in your class. Go back to episode 125 if you want all our tips and tricks for theme days.
Planning a fun countdown to the end of the year is another way to keep students motivated. Lots of teachers love an alphabet countdown. So like 26 days before the end of the school year, they do an activity starting with the letter A and they work their way through the alphabet doing a letter a day.
Back in episode 63, lots of teachers shared their fun end-of-year activities. So make sure to check those out for some teacher-approved ideas.
Hey there, teacher friend. Do you have a question or concern that could use a teacher-approved solution?
We'd love to help you out by answering your question here on the podcast. You can submit your questions to hello@secondstorywindow.net and put podcast question in your subject line. We can't wait to hear what's on your mind.
Which brings us to our 7th tip for motivation: use technology. For older students, this would be a great time to create a digital yearbook or time capsule. Students can contribute reflections, photos, and videos, and they can all be combined into one presentation.
If you have enough devices, you can use the Goose Chase app to create digital scavenger hunts around the school. Even younger students can be successful with this if they can manage the devices on their own.
You can combine a project with technology. Try assigning groups of students to make a presentation teaching your next year's students all the ins and outs of understanding one of the concepts that they will be learning in their new grade.
And using technology might be another way for you to try something new before next year. If there's an app or website you're considering incorporating into your future class, test it out now. It's a low-stakes way to try it out before you go to the work of planning your schedule around it next year.
Another way to use technology is for our 8th motivation tip: make connections with other students.
Flipgrid has a pen pal program called Grid Pals, where classes all over the world can connect, and Go Pangea has a pen pal schools program.
And just to note, we've heard lots of recommendations from teachers that like these programs, but we have not tested out either of these ourselves, so maybe do a little bit of digging online before you sign your class up.
Virtual field trips and guest speakers are other ways your students can connect using technology, but there are plenty of analog ways for students to make connections too.
Right. Making a connection can be as simple as having students write letters to their future teacher, or maybe to the student who will be sitting at their desk next year. You could try pairing up with a class in another grade and do buddy activities.
My 2nd graders had 5th grade buddies. They read with each other and played math games together. The older kids even taught my students how to play some fun games.
Or you could invite some students to visit your class from the next grade level up and have a little Q&A. Ahead of time, you could gather questions from your students about what to expect next year, and then have some students from that grade level visit your class and answer your students' questions. And then they can also share what they like best about being in that new grade.
This will probably run smoothest if you provide those students with the questions in advance so they can think through their answers instead of hoping they can come up with something useful on the fly.
Yeah, just because they're in the next grade level up doesn't mean they're any quicker on their feet.
Yeah.
And if you can get other grade levels on board, why not have students meet next year's teachers? If those teachers can get away for a few minutes, they can come introduce themselves to your class.
It might be more fun, though, to have your class visit next year's classrooms. If you can get other grade levels on board, you could have each grade rotate through the classrooms they'll be in next year.
And you don't have to know each student's class assignments yet to make this work. Each class could rotate through all of the next grade level's classrooms for an introduction and maybe a short fun activity. That way students will get to know all of the teachers that way.
Getting to see next year's classrooms is a great way to build excitement for the new school year, as well as fighting off that pesky no motivationitis.
And another way to battle no motivationitis is to change locations. Checking out next year's classrooms does double duty as making connections and changing locations, but there are lots of other ways to change locations at school.
Right. You could try doing your regular activities in a new place, like having a science review in the gym, or have students bring their books and do silent reading time in a quiet hallway.
If you can get your team on board, you can rotate classes. Each teacher can plan an activity, and then the rest of the grade level can rotate through. Maybe you spend a whole afternoon with kids rotating rooms, or you do one classroom each day for a week.
Not only does changing up locations keep students engaged, but it cuts back on the amount of planning you have to do. It's much easier to do one activity 5 times than it is to come up with 5 activities.
Of course, the easiest way to change locations is to take kids outside. If you are allowed, definitely try doing some learning outside.
Or you can just give your kids some extra recess. We promise we won't tell.
Our lips are sealed. All right, that brings us to our 10th tip for keeping students motivated at the end of the year, and that is to revisit your class favorites. As much as introducing new activities is motivating to students, so is revisiting old favorites.
Think about all the things your students have enjoyed this year. favorite stories you've read, favorite morning meeting greetings, favorite math games, favorite writing prompts, favorite indoor recess games, all the fun stuff that has shaped your class culture over the last 9 months. And then all you have to do is add it to your school day.
You already know that these classic hits motivate your students, so bring them back out. And now, not only are your students engaged, but you engage them without adding more work to your to-do list.
Win. And since students already know how to do these activities, they can manage them independently. That means you're free to work on some of those pesky end-of-year tasks that need your attention. So, sounds like a win-win to me.
So, if no motivationitis has crept into your classroom, do not fear. Try some or all of these 10 teacher-approved tips for motivating students at the end of the year.
1. Offer students a challenge. 2. Involve students in a project. 3. Try something new. 4. Preview next year's concepts. 5. Celebrate growth. 6. Add in the fun. 7. Use technology. 8. Connect with other students. 9. Change locations. And 10. Revisit class favorites. We are wishing you a class of busy, engaged learners who give you lots of free time to work on your own end-of-year tasks.
Do you have a suggestion for keeping students motivated at the end of the year? We would love to hear about it. Come join the conversation in our teacher-approved Facebook group.
Now let's talk about this week's teacher-approved tip. Each week we leave you with a small actionable tip that you can apply in your classroom today. This week's teacher-approved tip is plan an end-of-year reflection that gets you ahead for next year. Tell us about this, Heidi.
Well, you know we love giving a gift to our future selves, and we have got a great one today. Celebrating growth is our 5th tip for keeping students motivated, and we've got a fun new product to help you do that. It's a bulletin board set that has students looking back and looking forward. So to start, as a class, you brainstorm memorable moments from the past year. You can just list them on the board, and then each student chooses one to draw and write about if you want them to do the writing. Then you give each of the kids a Polaroid frame to draw on. You can print these in color or on colored paper, and if you do want to use colored paper, I tried really hard to match the Astro Bright color palette so everything would look cohesive if you wanted to use that paper. Then the kids draw their memory on the Polaroid frame, and you can add the writing page if they do that. You collect these, and then you use them to make an end-of-year bulletin board. We give you a header that says looking back at blank grade, and you can fill it with your grade level. But here's where the gift part comes in. When it's time to start setting up your class in the fall, all you have to do is trade out back at to forward to. And now your back to school bulletin board says looking forward to blank grade. And all you had to do was change out a couple words.
And you're not limited to using this on a bulletin board. You could put it on your door or on the wall outside your classroom. You could really put it anywhere you'll need a back to school display. Ideally, this is something you can put up in May and leave up all summer. But we know some schools aren't cool about that. They want everything off the walls because it's apparently so imperative that the school have bare walls all summer. If you're in that boat, we are sorry. But even if you can't leave it on display all summer, at least it will be easy to repost in the fall. Put it up somewhere that it will be easy to take it down from. Probably like choose your door in that situation because it's easy to take it off and put it back up. And just take a picture of it before you take it down. And then all you have to do is stick everything back up where you had it before.
It is so nice to have a meaningful way to fill some time at the end of the year. But my favorite part of this activity is actually what happens when school starts. When I did this with my own students, I was surprised by how touched my former students were to see that their work was still on display. I think it helped them feel like they still had a part in my classroom. And, you know, as the sappy, over emotional teacher at the first of the year, I loved having a way to show them that even though they are growing up and moving on, they'll always be my kids. And I am getting a little choked up even with the allergies.
If you are interested in this bulletin board set, you can find it in our store and we will put a link to it in the show notes. It includes the photo frames for students to color and different sized writing sheets. Plus, it has all the bulletin board pieces like the title, some cute border strips, and a teacher guide that walks you through everything step by step.
Plus, if you use a Cricut or Silhouette cutting machine, we've also included the SVG files as well to make that as easy as possible.
It's the first time we've done that. It feels so fun. I wish I had a cutter still so I could test it out. I don't even have a cutter anymore. So if you try it out, please send us a photo. We'd love to see how you adapt it for your classroom. And if you use the cutter, tell us about that too.
To wrap up the show, we are sharing what we're giving extra credit to this week. Emily, what gets your extra credit?
I'm giving extra credit to Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez. I think I've given extra credit to all 3 of the books in this series because I just love them all so much. She's probably my favorite like modern romance writer.
Yeah, she's really good.
This is one of those series that is actually all standalone books, but if you do read them in order, you'll see some characters from other books and some fun little Easter eggs too, but you really can read them in any order. This latest one is about Justin, who discovers he has a curse. Every woman he dates goes on to find their soulmate the second they break up. When his curse goes viral, thanks to a Reddit thread, a woman slides into his DMs with the same problem, and they come up with a plan. They'll date each other and break up, and then they can find their true soulmates.
Perfect. What could go wrong?
I know. I just also really love that Abby's books have a lot of witty banter, but they tackle serious issues too, like trauma and anxiety. So highly recommend the latest from Abby Jimenez.
That sounds like the perfect summer read. Put it on your list.
I already finished it, and I'm sad. Okay, what are you giving extra credit to, Heidi?
Well, there's much less banter with my extra credit. I'm giving extra credit to a plastic label scraper tool. Woo! The other night, I was trying to get some like gluey residue off a bottle, and this little dude came. It's so handy. I just put some Goo Gone on there, you know, that orangey liquid stuff. Yes. And then I used the little scraper tool, and it all came off lickety split. I didn't have to use my fingernails at all, which is always a win. So if you are responsible for getting sticky labels off of surfaces in your classroom at the end of the year, this could be a real lifesaver. I know I always had to do that, or my custodian would get real frustrated with me. Back when I was a custodian in college, we just used a razor blade to get up sticky stuff. But a plastic scraper is probably much safer to have in a classroom. Although, Emily, you have shown me up by getting a heat gun, which sounds way cooler than a scraper to get up sticky labels.
And I literally just got it. Like, I just used it for the first time like 2 days ago. Of course, my kids thought it shot fire because that's what the box looked like. I heard them saying like, "Oh, that thing shoots fire." I'm like, "No, it doesn't. It just gets hot." And if you have a hairdryer, you can use that as well. But I don't. Mine broke and I never replaced it. So I got a heat gun instead. And it worked great.
Well, also that would be nice to have, you know, probably around downstairs or in the kitchen.
Yes.
Where you're getting labels off as opposed to in your bathroom where the hairdryer is and labels
Yes, you don't have to like run upstairs and get your hairdryer. But I think it would probably work even better if you also had a little scraper to use with it. So I'll have to look at your scraper tool. I think the two together will be an excellent combo.
Yes. Well, make sure you put a link to the heat gun in the show notes then.
I guess that's my bonus extra credit.
Yes. We love you so much for giving you a little extra today.
That's it for today's episode. Try some or all of our 10 teacher-approved tips for motivating students at the end of the year. And don't forget our teacher-approved tip to plan an end-of-year celebration that gets you ahead for next year.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Teacher Approved. I'm Heidi.
And I'm Emily. Thank you for listening.
Be sure to follow or subscribe in your podcast apps so that you never miss an episode. You can connect with us and other teachers in the Teacher Approved Facebook group. We'll see you here next week. Bye for now.
Bye.